Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So many of us have worked together over the years. It's like a reunion in some ways, but our ever-widening circle of friends and leaders in this fight, especially today on the one-year anniversary of the unlawful invasion of Ukraine. Madam Ambassador, it's an honor always to be with you. Igor, so I recognize the important role you're playing now at the Bush Institute, at the Bradford Friedman Initiative. Fargo, as we call him, was a dear, right, Josh? A dear friend, and so proud to have you in that role that David had before he now became the big humma. And again, to have those representatives, Valeria and the gentleman who spoke, whose name is going to be difficult for me to pronounce, and I don't want to do an injustice to it, having PEPFAR in Ukraine come here and speak of the connection between freedom. As the president said, as President Bush said, equality, justice, fairness is all important in terms of health. Pope Paul VI, he said, if you want peace, work for justice. And PEPFAR is about justice, about health justice. Martin Luther King said of all the inequalities that are out there, the inequality in terms of health care is the most inhuman, he said, because people can die. Because of President, and I could not resist coming here, even though Congress isn't in session, to bring greetings of so many of us in Congress who've worked on these issues on both sides of the aisle, on both sides of the Capitol for such a long time. To salute President Bush and Laura Bush for their, not only their leadership at the birth of this, the statement at the State of the Union. And I jumped up right away when he made this announcement, representing San Francisco as I do, but for their ongoing dedication to it. So we know when President Bush made the announcement and Bono was involved in Secretary Rice and this or that, I said to Bono, no photo ops unless Congress goes big. We have to go big, right, Josh? I mean, it was one thing to ask for $15 billion, another thing to get it. And now imagine $100 billion over time, and a model to the world on how to have fairness and care. Representing San Francisco as I do, this was an issue for me from the first moment I was in Congress. The first words on the floor of the House when I was sworn in was to say, I've come here, I've told my constituents I would come to Congress and I would fight HIV and AIDS. Right away, people started looking down, and I thought, what's with that? And they were saying, why would you say that? Why would you want that to be the first thing people know about you in the Congress? Why did you say you came here to fight against HIV and AIDS? I said, because I did. Because we saw in our community the toll that it was taking. Worked with our President Bush's father, George Herbert Walker Bush, called Dr. Fauci a national hero. And that was now going back 30 years or so, and he is a national hero. He was our champion right from the start. But he can tell you how, shall we say, impatient some of us were from areas that were so affected. One of the point I wanted to make in this regard is we would have all kinds of events in San Francisco, whether they were at church, whether they were on the street, where the health centers and all the rest, about fighting HIV and AIDS. But one of the really important ones that we had, it was an annual global vigil in the fight against global AIDS, because in San Francisco we believed that we could not conquer AIDS domestically unless we dealt with it internationally. And that is what President Bush did so effectively. I mentioned Laura Bush. She spoke so beautifully in opening us up today, of course. But it must be about 10 years ago, President Obama had an event where he invited the heads of state of African countries and spouses. Many spouses were there, and we saluted Laura Bush. And her pink ribbon initiative for the women. And again, President Bush and Laura Bush dedicated, ongoing, and still. In the Congress, as our president, as the two secretaries, Deputy and Secretary of State mentioned, President, in this State of the Union, President Biden announced that this was successful. He was in praise of it all, and we will reauthorize it, but we want to reauthorize it in, again, a big way. Bono was so much a part of it. President Lincoln said, public sentiment is everything. With it, you can do almost anything. Without it, practically nothing. And he was very much part of the public sentiment, or all of this. Listening to the previous panel and why, when I went to Congress more than 35 years ago, talking about AIDS the first day, I would never have believed that 35 years out we would still not have a cure and we would still not have a vaccine. But as Dr. Fauci knows better than any of us, this is a very resilient virus. It keeps mutating. Just when you think you have it, it kind of changes. So what do we have to do is improve the quality of life. I mean, I used to have monthly meetings of people with HIV would come to my office in San Francisco way back when. Can you help me make out a will? Can you help me with this? Can you help me with that? And then pretty soon, same people were coming in asking, could I get them a job? Because of the work that was done to improve the quality of life. I'll close by saying this. I have a lot more I want to say, but you have a wonderful panel coming up, and my former colleague, Leanna Rose Slayton, who was the chair of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the Congress, you're going to hear from her about our bipartisanship again. And by the way, when this passed, I was the Democratic leader in the House, and Senator Frist was the Republican leader in the Senate, and he has had an ongoing dedication to this, being a physician himself. And right now, the Senate has a delegation in Africa. And I'll close by talking about my delegation to Africa. Well, one of my delegations to Africa. We went there and we visited a number of clinics and the rest about PEPFAR. And by the way, Presidential Emergency Plan for AIDS. What's the last word? Relief. It could have been PEPFAR. It could have been Bush Emergency Plan for AIDS relief. But presidential has made it everyone's responsibility, and that's a good thing. But when we were there, and I'll just close with this. Did I say close a number of times? I think I mean it this time. Here's the thing. If there's one word I could use for PEPFAR, it's hope. We would go, and people would come to see us, and they'd say, I would never. These are really poor people out in the hinterlands. I would never have gotten tested before PEPFAR. Because why would I use that word, have the stigma in my community and in my family, if there was nothing that I could do about it? But because of PEPFAR, I was tested, and now I have a life. Hope. President Bush's initiative, PEPFAR, is about hope. And all of you are just making that, look, we heard from Watatu, and Faith, her daughter's name is Faith. Faith gives us hope. So thank you all for what you do to keep this going, to grow it, to continue it, whether it's about the science, or whether it's about the equality of it all, the justice of it all, whether it's about the goodness. And in close, once again, I'll just say this honestly, that the Bush family, it's because of their humanity, their faith, their generosity of spirit, their compassion. Once again, it's an honor to be associated with President Bush in this. He said this was his second time to be here. I've been here many, many times, So I've been with him 100% of the times he's been here. Because we were both here for the groundbreaking when I was Speaker and he was President. So let us again work for peace, work for justice. Thank you all for what you do in that regard. Thank you.